Today I'm talking to Stephen M.R. Covey, and we talk about trust, why it is so crucial creating high-performing relationships and companies, and why, unfortunately, there seems to be an abundance of lack of trust, and what we can do about it. I think you're going to love this one. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I've got Stephen M.R. Covey with me today. Stephen, welcome to the How That Happened podcast.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I'm really excited and delighted to be here with you today.
Well, this has been almost 2 years in the making, Stephen. I reached out to you after hearing you on the Story Brand podcast back in August of 2020. And I'm glad I was persistent, and I'm glad that you were, that I didn't annoy you, and that we were finally able to get this scheduled. So really happy to have you here.
Yeah. Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Excited for it.
So for those of you who haven't heard of Stephen yet, or for those of you who have and want to know why I've got him here, let me tell you a little bit about Stephen M.R. Covey. So Stephen is co-founder of Covey Link and of the FranklinCovey Global Speed of Trust practice. He's a sought-after and compelling keynote speaker and advisor on trust, leadership, ethics, and high performance. He speaks to audiences around the world and to an audience on this humble podcast as well. He is the New York Times and #1 Wall Street Journal bestselling author of The Speed of Trust and co-author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Smart Trust. And his newest book, Trust&Inspire, How Truly Great Leaders Unleash the Greatness in Others, just came out in April of 2022, I believe. Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah, just a couple months out.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
And this book, I had a chance to read it. Thank you for sending me a copy. And it comes with some really, amazing acclaim from people you may have heard of, like Tony Robbins and Marshall Goldsmith and Indra Nooyi and Adam Grant, just to name a few. So congratulations on that as well, getting all those really well-known leaders to weigh in on this great work that you've produced.
Thank you. Very great.
Stephen advocates that nothing is as fast as the speed of trust, and that the ability to establish, grow, extend, and restore trust with all stakeholders is the critical leadership competency of the new global economy. But what I find most interesting about Stephen, at least so far, prior to the podcast, is that he's not one of these people who sort of, talks the talk but hasn't walked the walk. He's the former CEO of Covey Leadership Center, which under his stewardship became the largest leadership development company in the world. Stephen, with his collaborator, Greg Link, led the strategy that propelled his father's book, Dr. Stephen R. Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which you may have heard of, to become one of the 2 most influential business books of the 20th century, according to CEO magazine. Which is the other, Stephen?
The other was rated, it was Tom Peters and Bob Waterman's In Search of Excellence. Okay. Well, thank you. I was thinking maybe it was Think and Grow Rich, but In Search of Excellence. Okay. So Stephen joined the Covey Leadership Center as a client developer. This is right. He worked his way up. So as a client developer and later became the national sales manager and then the president and CEO. And under his direction, the company grew rapidly, achieving Inc. 500 status, not 5,000. As president and CEO, he nearly doubled revenues to over $110 million while increasing profits by 12 times. The company grew to be a worldwide leader, and the value grew. I don't even know the math on 2.4 to 160, but it's a lot of times. Yeah. And he orchestrated a merger with what was then Franklin Quest to become FranklinCovey. And you can learn more about Stephen at his website, or at FranklinCovey website, FranklinCovey, COVEY.com. And his socials are all
looks like all Stephen M.R. Covey. Twitter, I know he's active on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So,
and Instagram now. So,
and Instagram, of course. TikTok?
Not TikTok.
Not yet.
Don't worry. My daughter's working on me.
Okay.
He says I got to be relevant with the youth.
You got to be there. Sure. Sure. So, Stephen, I start every podcast with the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
I think it's a great question, by the way. You and I were talking before the podcast, and I think it's a great question because it gives each of us a chance to kind of share our story in a way that is unique to us. So as I kind of prepared for this, here's how I would say how this happened to me. I'll give it in two pieces. The first is when I did become the president and CEO of the Covey Leadership Center, I really focused on how if we could build, a high trust team and a high trust culture, that would enable us to do everything else that we were trying to do better. I really believe that and it wasn't that we weren't low trust, that we were low trust. We weren't. We had good trust. I felt like this could be a big advantage if we got even better. And so we focused on this intentionally and actually built a great culture of trust. And then we became very collaborative, very innovative. We moved fast. All kinds of things happen when you build trust, all kinds of great things. And we figured out a good business model because prior to this point, we had a good value proposition for customers around the work we were doing, built really around my father's work of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Good value proposition, but we hadn't figured out yet how to monetize it and how to turn it into a sustainable business. And so we had high growth, but with low margins, and we had a lot of debt, and yet we were growing, but with these low margins and a lot of debt, no outside capital, we were going to grow ourselves out of business.
Yeah, sure.
And so we had to figure out a business model to really become sustainable. And I'll tell you what, we became far more collaborative, far more innovative as we built the trust. We figured out the model, and then we were able to do all kinds of great things. So that's kind of the first half.
Okay.
And I realized then I saw the power firsthand of the great benefits, the dividends of a high trust team, a high trust culture. Then we did a merger with our arch competitor, the then Franklin Quest. And that was heavy into the time management. This is back the old Franklin day planners.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And we were into time management as well with our first things first. And so we'd been arch competitors, for many years in the marketplace, in the time management space. And now we merged companies because we felt like the combination could be better for customers. And we felt like, we got good people on both sides of these companies and good values. We can make this work. And long story made short, the merger was a real challenge, especially initially, just because we had approached the world through different lenses of how we saw it. And again, we had good people from both sides. But because we'd been competitive and really arch competitors, there was kind of some distrust. Yeah. Not that we had done things to each other while we had merged, but just kind of our roots coming into this and the fact that we saw the world differently. And so suddenly we found ourselves in a culture of distrust where everyone was kind of interpreting things and reading things into it. And suddenly we were not very collaborative, and suddenly we were not very innovative. We became inward focused instead of focusing on the customer, and everything started to slow down. There was suspicion creeping in, and so now, having earlier experienced firsthand the great dividends, returns, benefits of high trust, now I was starting to see the high cost of low trust and how everything slowed down and costs more became politicized and people became increasingly disengaged, and everything was interpreted through the lens of politics and kind of, are you a Covey person or a Franklin person instead of the combined company? And that was a real challenge. And then we kind of came to and recognized that, you know what, we need to practice what we're teaching here and apply our own material to ourselves. And we need to focus on building a high trust team, a high trust culture. We can't just assume it. We can't just take it for granted. And so we began to work on this intentionally, saying we got to build trust with each other. We got to behave our way into greater trust. And we began to do this, becoming increasingly transparent and open and authentic and vulnerable and real. And we began to listen a lot better to each other and to understand, to demonstrate respect and to clarify expectations and to be accountable. And then really above all, to extend trust to each other. In order to build trust, you got to give trust.
Right.
And the net of this was that we moved the needle dramatically. And we went from low trust to high trust. And when we build a high trust team and culture, again, back to my earlier experience, suddenly different in kind outcomes, different in kind collaboration, teaming, partnering, engagement of people. And we can come up with we were more innovative, more creative, and we came up with wonderful solutions. But it was a real crucible for me on this second half, because here I'd been the CEO of Covey Leadership Center. So, I'm merging with this, we're merging with this, with Franklin Quest. And in this process, the reality, Mike, is that at least for a period of time, half the people didn't trust me. Right. And I thought I was really trustworthy. And, and I'd been that way, and it was perceived that way with the Covey people, but the Franklin people didn't see it that way. And this kind of arch competitors, mindset had just kind of infected everyone. And half the people didn't trust me. And I had to intentionally work at it, build that trust, demonstrate it through my behavior, not just through words, but through actions over time to earn that trust and to build it. And so it was kind of a crucible experience for me, but I came away from this whole thing and I recognize I've seen firsthand the high cost of low trust. And that's given me an understanding of this in a way that I wouldn't have appreciated fully if I'd only seen the positive side from my first experience.
Sure. Yeah. Like it's too easy, right? It's
too easy.
It's too easy.
Right? This is easy. Why doesn't everyone do this? Now I'm on the other side. And I felt misunderstood that people, they don't trust me. Well, they don't know me type of thing. And I had to really earn those insights. And it was difficult, but I came away from this recognizing trust matters enormously more than anything else we can do because of how it impacts everything else that we're doing.
Yeah.
Second, I came to the conclusion that trust is learnable. It's something you can build on purpose, intentionally, because we did that. We did it when we said we got to build this trust. And then when we did it, it changed everything. And from that experience, I said, aha, I think I found my voice, what I want to talk about, what I want to write about, what I want to do is trust, because I've experienced both sides of this, the good side, the bad side. Right. And I've seen how this is learnable. And too much of the stuff on trust out there to date was either too academic or too simplistic. And I felt like I could give a practical approach to how to build and grow trust intentionally and why it matters more than anything else you might do as a leader. And from that emerged my book, The Speed of Trust, and now this new book, Trust&Inspire, and really what has become my life's work. It emerged from kind of this crucible experience of having to earn this trust in a time I felt unfairly distrusted.
And it's in the book, you do spend a lot of time. It's not all in one place, but here and there, talking about this disconnect that leaders often have about how trustworthy they are perceived to be, or they believe themselves to be, versus how their teams look at them, which is kind of what you were saying was your own experience. And I've done my share of acquisitions, and it's you think it's going to be easy because your people trust you, right? So you think, well, I'm going to come in, and even though there's this sort of organic, if you're buying a competitor, at least there's this organic sort of natural distrust, right? You guys must be doing something wrong because we lost to you on this, or vice versa.
Right.
You still go in with the expectation that, hey, I'm Steven, or I'm Mike, and everybody trusts me, so you're going to trust me too. It's just going to be natural, and it's really not. I always look at it as you go in and you have this little moment to take everything up and then keep it there, right? But you get up there, you start off good because you, as the leadership team, for example, I don't know what your negotiations were like, Stephen, but you're like, yeah, we see the synergies, we see how we're so much aligned, and we see that, all these great things for everybody. But what everybody else sees who wasn't in those meetings might be, this is dangerous. This could be bad for me, right? And so you only have this little window of time to get it here and stabilize it before it starts to go down here. And then you're like, oh gosh, I got to dig myself out of a trough, which is what it sounds like your experience was as well.
What you're describing, Mike, is kind of precisely what happened.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed trust. I just kind of assumed it because I had it with our team, our group. I assumed that we would have it going forward. It would be known. And I didn't put myself out enough intentionally, deliberately, and build it explicitly on purpose and letting people know I wanted to earn their trust and demonstrate. I just kind of assumed it.
Right.
And you're right. But people had all their different viewpoints of the merger, the good, the bad. But over time, what happened is it started to become politicized, where people would view it through a we-they lens. And if that tips, and it did tip initially, then that can put you upside down, where you're now got to dig your way out. And that happened to us. But the good news is we did dig our way out, and we earned it. We gained it back, and the positive was that I really, having had that experience of seeing firsthand and experiencing firsthand the high cost of low trust, it gave me far greater clarity, far greater insight and understanding into both why trust matters and how to build it and how to rebuild it when it's been lost.
And you mentioned several times the word intentional. So once we became aware of this, we started to take intentional steps to correct it. And I'm curious what some of those may have been. Like, is the first step like acknowledging, hey, I think we may have messed up here. I think we may have, eroded some trust that we could have prevented. Some acknowledgement of, yeah. So can you walk me through how that happened?
Absolutely. In fact, I'll never forget. I was flying to a meeting of our consultants, which is, for our type of business, the key part that these are the folks that interface with clients, that do training and learning and consulting and leadership development workshops and the like. And we were gathering about a third of them at a meeting. We were going to do 3 meetings of a third. And I remember going to this meeting and kind of, I had my presentation on the strategy of this new combined company. But I remember going in and saying, you know what? Our problem is not people questioning the strategy. Our problem is that there's distrust. We've been these arch competitors and we haven't really addressed this. And I remember debating, do I give this presentation? I had the whole PowerPoint on all the strategy, what we're going to do. But I got thinking, you know what? If people don't trust me, they don't really care about.
Yeah, no one's listening. Yeah,
no one's listening.
Yeah.
And so I decided to take a risk. And I said, I'm going to become as authentic and real and even vulnerable as I can to get real. And I went in and I said, look, I came prepared to talk about our strategy going forward. And I'm happy to do that. And I'd like to, but I'd rather talk about what you'd like to talk about. And I really want to open this meeting up and see where you want to go. You know, what's on your mind as here we are in this merger and we're having these struggles and we're trying to make decisions as which compensation plan we're going to adopt, the Franklin one, the Covey one, which structure are we going to adopt and who's this and who's that and who's making these decisions and is it balanced and, you know, how are we going about doing this? If you'd rather talk about that, I'd love to talk about that too. So where would you like to go? And, you know, to a person, everyone said, let's get real. Let's open this up. And so without an agenda, we then totally got rid of the whole day's plans. Mm-hmm. I literally spent the entire day just opening things up. And I really focused on listening, not judging, evaluating, but just to listen. We'd put things up and then we'd just talk openly.
Yeah.
And I tried to talk as straight as I could. I tried to be as transparent as I could. I said, you know, so someone would say, well, are you balancing the needs of all stakeholders on this, or are you just taking a Covey approach to this? And then I kind of share, okay, that's a fair question. I said, so here's what I'm trying to do, but maybe I'm not doing as well as I could be, and I need to be, you know, and I was open and real. And I'll never forget, we went through and then we also came up with a bunch of things we needed to work on. And we kind of accumulated them at the end, went through them all, and we made commitments around them. And so that built some hope that maybe we're going to address some of these things. But the trust came really when we followed through on all those commitments and came back to them. That built the trust. And we need both the hope and the trust. And so, you know, making and keeping the commitment. But I will remember, though, I'll never forget after this day-long meeting that just was open and spontaneous and transparent. Flying back, there was someone that came up to me and said, Stephen, we built more trust today in one day than we have in the prior year. And that was still just the beginning. I still needed to follow through, but it was a dramatic turnaround. And it happened faster than we thought by being just intentional, deliberate, with transparency, with straight talk, with listening, with demonstrating respect, and with extending trust to each other.
And before that person came up to you, Stephen, I'm wondering if you remember how you felt after that day, because I'm sitting here trying to put myself in your shoes, and I'm thinking I could either have come away from that meeting, you know, really energized, or I could have come away from that meeting just exhausted, like, oh my gosh, am I going to have a chance to win these people back, or have we just blown it?
Yeah, I came away energized, and I'll tell you why. It's because in me being vulnerable and going first and being transparent and open, people saw that I didn't have an agenda. Mm-hmm. There was no hidden agenda. That I was trying to do the right thing for everybody. That I was trying to balance the different perspectives and sides. That I had people around me that were helping. And I told people asked, well, are you biased? And I, you know, my mantra became this, that the height of subjectivity is to think that you're objective. And the height of objectivity is to know that you're naturally subjective and to take steps to compensate for that.
Yeah.
So said,
how could you not be? How could you not be? Right?
I said, so my name is Stephen M.R. Covey. I ran the Covey Leadership Center. So I probably am quite subjective towards the things we were doing. I know that. So I need to take steps to compensate for that subjectivity and surround myself with people who saw the world differently, that came from the Franklin side and have a different perspective, a different idea, a different approach, and to listen to that and to be influenced by that. And so when people began to see that I actually was doing this and trying to do this, but I could do it better, it really actually, we felt it in the meeting itself, that this was, that all the things we were envisioning that were going to be good about this merger could in fact come about. It's just that we'd gotten lost in this process. And I'll tell you what, Mike, it happened fast afterwards to where we got to where all the purposes of the merger ultimately began to come about, of the synergies and the possibilities of things we could do together. It didn't happen overnight, but it was an accelerator to it as we became intentional and deliberate about it. So I did come away energized, but going into it, I must acknowledge it was white knuckle flying time.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah.
And I literally weighed, this is a risk to do. It'd be safer to kind of just go down the strategy path and ignore this, but I don't know how effective it was going to be. And I knew that we were really mired in this distrust and we had to address this. Yeah. We couldn't I just felt like we can't just keep kicking the can down the road. It's not working.
Yeah. And I've seen, and I've probably done this myself. This elephant is in the room. You realize it, right? You know that you're walking into a room that's not 100% bought into you, but you have your strategy presentation, right? And you, in your case, you had this choice to make, and I think a lot of leaders would make the opposite choice. They would say, okay, this elephant is in the room, but I'm going to be so great explaining the strategy that I'm going to, overcome the elephant, and I'm going to convert everyone. And at the end, when no one has any questions or anything, you walk away and you're like, I did it. I knew I could do it. I did it. And nothing changed, of course, except, you just deciding I'm not going to address the elephant in the room. I'm going to just try to destroy it instead.
Yeah. That's kind of it. And I wish I were as smart as you're describing, Mike, because one reason I came to that decision to do it is because I'd had a lot of other meetings where I didn't do it. Where I didn't address the elephant in the room, where I tried to win people over with a strategy or an approach and this and that. And because I'd seen, hey, you know what? The way I'm doing this, I'm not addressing the issue. Everyone knows it's an issue. And it's not working. So I took a risk, but it was because I'd kind of come to the point of saying, I've got to do something different.
Yeah.
And yes, but it still was frightening. And it still was a risk to be that open, that vulnerable, that transparent. But I'd kind of tested a little bit and I thought, this current path's not working. I need to take a risk.
Yeah.
And go a different path. It still took a lot of courage. I wish I would have done it a little bit earlier is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I ultimately did do it and it changed everything. And again, it's always important that I finish the story, which is that truly we came together and we built a great organization, the FranklinCovey organization. Here we are. It's been 25 years now. So that gives you,
since the merger, 25 years?
25 years.
Oh my gosh.
So, I'm going quite back in time, but it was for me, it was from this experience that I then said, I need to write about trust. This is my voice because this is a topic that's impacting every organization and every leader. And there's the stuff out there on it is, again, too simplistic or too academic, but not as practical. And I feel like I have found something to say that could be of value. And that's when I wrote Speed of Trust and now it's Trust&Inspire from that experience. And it really became the foundation for all the work that I'm doing now. So that's how it happened for me.
I thank you for sharing that and entertaining my sort of digging in on some of that stuff.
I appreciate it. Love it. Your questions.
Oftentimes I don't read the acknowledgement portion of a book. But I chose to read yours today because of the cover that had, multiple names on it. David Casper, McKinley Covey, and Gary T. Judd. You normally don't see that in a book. You may see one additional person. And I was thinking to myself, well, what's the deal with these people? And that took me to the acknowledgement page and acknowledgement pages. And what I guess I wanted to ask you why that was so important to you and how they actually helped bring this book to life, Stephen. But But the other thing I want to get your viewpoint on is the kind of team that you have that helps you not only do, I'm sure, what we just talked about, build and continue to maintain trust and then teach it to other people, but make you the very best version of you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your asking this because it's important to me. And, while I had my agreement with the publisher, Simon Schuster, was I'd be the author of the book. Mm-hmm. And, and I'd written Speed of Trust, and I have the name and the brand around trust. For Trust and Inspire, I involved a team that I'd been working with on some of these ideas, testing it, trying it, collaborating, thinking out loud, bouncing ideas back and forth. And they truly were collaborative in every sense of the word. And they helped the ideas become better and more impactful, more powerful, more simple, and better than I would have done on my own without people. But I felt strongly that it's not enough for me to just kind of acknowledge them quietly. I wanted to acknowledge them publicly, put them their names on the book, mm-hmm. and to acknowledge that these were my collaborators and co-authors. Yes, I was the lead author, but I wanted to give them recognition. I try to subscribe to what we talk about in this book, that there's enough for everyone, mm-hmm. An abundance mentality. That's part of the fundamental belief of a trust and inspire leader. I'm striving to be a trust and inspire leader myself. And one of the beliefs is that there's enough for everyone. So my sharing recognition and attribution and success with others doesn't take away anything from me. It just is acknowledging publicly and that others contributed enormously to this book and to this process and what we've done together. And to me, it was important to acknowledge it publicly. And that's by putting their names on the book. And also to express kind of in the acknowledgments of why it was so important that this really was synergy, that mm-hmm. It was not just independent work, it was interdependent work. And it was better because of that. What's that expression that none of us is as smart as all of us? And this, I think, is a better work because David, McKinley, and Gary were part of doing this together. Okay. And, with me, and I felt strong about recognizing that. I even did a similar thing on the Speed of Trust, where I acknowledged Rebecca Merrill, who helped me in writing it. And they were my ideas, but she helped me write it. And oftentimes, someone that helps you in the writing process doesn't get attribution, but I felt strong that I wanted to put her name on it.
Yeah.
Again, there's enough for everyone.
Yeah. As a reader, it made me feel, not that I didn't have trust in you, but it made me feel better. Like it made me, because there are so many books that get written, particularly by people who are, have some established street cred, let's say, right. Who they didn't write a word of the book. Mm-hmm. And then they take credit for writing the whole book as if it was all their work product. And I'm sure it was their ideas and that kind of stuff. Right. But, it doesn't have to be all about you to be important. That's how I feel, at least.
I agree with you. I agree. And this was a book that for me personally, it was really something I was thinking about for 17 years and working on for 6 years, but I wasn't working in isolation by myself. I was working with a team, and I was involved in every word in the book, in writing and helping write mm-hmm. every word. So I wasn't distant, but I had collaborators that were helping me think about it and refine it and language it and sequence it and make this more impactful, more
as big as valuable as it can be, right? That's what you're
as valuable as it can be. It's a better product because of the collaboration.
And you also mentioned in the acknowledgments that your sort of beginning and completing your father's work in the eighth habit. And I want to know what you actually mean by that. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I said this in my first book, The Speed of Trust, that I feel like I'm standing on the shoulder of a giant. I think, I forget who said it. It might have been Newton. Can't remember, so don't quote me on it. But someone, I think it might have been Newton, said, if I've seen further than others, it's only because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And I would say, if I've drilled down on trust a whole lot, it's because I've stood on the shoulder of a giant, my father, and his thinking and the 7 habits, and because trust is a part of that too. It's not one of the habits, but it's kind of an outcome of what happens when you live the 7 habits. And so it enabled me to kind of go deeper. And similarly here, I felt like this book, Trust and Inspire, it's really all about the kind of leadership that's needed today. And the old model, I'm calling command and control. And we've gotten better at it, more sophisticated, more advanced. I call it an enlightened command and control. It's a better version than an authoritarian command and control, but it's still kind of based upon the paradigm of seeing people as things as opposed to people, and in this book, I make the point, you manage things and you lead people.
Right.
And we need both good management and good leadership, but the danger comes when we start to manage people as if they were things. And that's the old model, the command and control. This is Trust and Inspire. But a lot of the thinking on this began with work that I'd done years ago. That's why I say 17 years with my father, where he and I were doing some workshops together, some big public presentations. And obviously he was the biggest name and draw. He wrote the 7 habits,
right? Yeah,
and the 8th habit. And so he'd take about 2/3 the time. I take about 1/3 the time. And I'll never forget going to these sessions, and he'd begin by asking, audiences, usually about 1,000 people in the room from all kinds of different organizations. And he'd ask this question, how many of you believe that the vast majority of the people in your organization have far more talent, ingenuity, creativity, energy, and capacity than their current job requires or even allows them to contribute? And almost every hand,
all the hands go up, right?
Go up.
Yeah,
almost everyone say people have a lot more they can give. Then he'd ask a follow-on question, and how many of you are also under greater demands to achieve more with less? And again, almost every hand would go up, and then he'd kind of stand back and say, so what's wrong with this picture? Here we all are under greater pressure to produce more with less, and yet we're not tapping into people's greatest potential and greatness and talent and ingenuity and creativity. What's wrong with this? And it was he kind of teed up the idea that the way we're leading is not unleashing the greatness in others. And it was that idea that got implanted in me 17 years ago that I began to think about this, and it ultimately got kind of codified in this form of, are we just staying in the existing paradigm, just becoming better at it, the enlightened command and control, or are we moving to a whole new paradigm of leadership that's all about unleashing the potential, the greatness that's inside of people? And I know that's a big part of your podcast, is to bring out the greatness in people.
Yeah, right.
And I read that as I prepared and saw that. And that's what Trust and Inspire is about, unleashing that greatness to be relevant for our times. And to close those gaps between what people are capable of and what they're actually doing. That's the leadership that can close that gap. And that will make all the difference in the world. And so, and that was a big part of the message of the 8th habit. And I felt like I'm continuing that, building upon that, and kind of taking it down my ideas around Trust and Inspire, being a way that will close that gap. But, my starting point is, I feel like, again, standing on the shoulder of a giant in my father.
Let me ask about those 2 questions. So you Do people have more to give? Yes. Are you asked to do more with less? Yes. In my mind, I thought, okay, is the other question that needs to be asked is, are you asking people in your organization to do more because you believe that they can? And by doing more, it would be good for them personally first. And second, it would be good for the organization. Is that something am I off base there? Or is that something that's maybe missing in the command and control equation?
Yeah. Well, part of that question was implicitly put into the first one.
Okay.
Which was that, do you believe your people have more capability, talent, knowledge, insight, ingenuity than their current job requires or even allows them to give? In other words, it's just that we're not tapping into it. We're either not asking for it or we're not seeking it. And we're not, either not aware of it, not asking for it, not seeking it. So it's kind of built in to that very first question.
Yeah. Or we're not open to it.
Yeah. We're not doing enough because sometimes the jobs not only don't require it, they don't allow for it. And we're not asking for it is the implicit assumption. So that question was kind of built into the first, that as much as we're asking, there's still a whole lot more that people have that they could give.
And there's a lot of great examples and charts and stuff about the difference between command and control and trust and inspire in the book. So I'm not going to ask you about all of those things. People can get the book and they can read those. But one of the things I do want to ask you about was like to have the perspective you have. And I know you've coached and taught many people, plus had your own organization, which is always a great, your own little laboratory, to figure this out, as we were talking about.
Absolutely.
But I know you had this experience with Trammell Crow that you write about in the book with John Walsh, and, kind of you getting hired and then nobody wanted you on their team and their regional team. Have you, so it made me wonder, and I'm sure, and John is certainly not going to be this person, but what has your experience been, or have you had one with directly with a control and command and control leader, like that you were reporting to or working with? And just, I'm just curious.
Yeah. The short answer is yes, I have.
Yeah. Okay.
On more than one occasion. And I think most of us have.
Yeah. I know I have
people that, you have, and I have too. Have you had more than one? I'm Mike.
I have had one that I would consider extremely command and control. And then I've had one or two others who were, I'd say, episodically command and control. So like when the pressure goes up, the command and control comes. Like when you don't know how to handle something, you go back to what you were taught. That's how I always thought about it.
It is. It's like learning a language in a new country. And then when you're hammering a nail, if you miss the nail and hit your thumb, you're going to scream out in your native tongue.
Yeah.
not in the language.
Yeah. Right. Yes. You're going to,
because the pressure's on, it happened, and you go back to what you know, right? Yeah. So I've had the same. And the data shows that for all our progress, we've mostly moved from authoritarian command and control to a more enlightened command and control. And that there's still, 90% of organizations are still predominantly in an enlightened command and control place, and as opposed to trust and inspire. And so I think most people can point to the leaders that are command and control, even if they're good people and they liked them, but they oftentimes just still feel like they weren't unleashed by them.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you mentioned nails, because there is a very interesting story about incentives in the book and how people adapt to maximize incentives, but that poorly constructive incentives may not make the impact you hope they would. And so Stephen has this interesting story about Russian nail makers, I think it is, in the book. I think that's in the book. yeah, Charlie Munger, I think you quote, and then there's this little story. Anyway, it's funny if you want to check it out. So first of all, the nuance, if there is a nuance between command and control and enlightened command and control, what is that?
The
or is it a separate phase?
Well, no, it's actually kind of real. It's real improvement. I mean, we brought things like emotional intelligence and strengths. Focusing on people's strengths and mission and the importance of that and other things to it. So it's a much improved version than the authoritarian command and control of just all dictating to people and just treating people like cogs in the machine. But still, in many cases, we still haven't shifted the paradigm, and we still view that people are a means to an end. Even the expression "people are our most important assets," that's well intentioned.
Yes,
and so the sentiment is good that we care about people, but an asset is kind of like a means to an end, and as opposed to this being all about the people. And it's just kind of like you could say in enlightened command and control, you're trying to get results through people. Nothing wrong with that inherently. You want to work through people, but if people are merely a means to an end, you could clearly kind of push that to the extreme, where you kind of milk people as far as you can go to get more out of the asset, to get more results, as opposed to a trust and inspire approach, which is get results in a way that grows people. So people, yes, we want to get results. That is an end. And growing people also is an end. So we get results in a way that grows people. And so, it's just the thing versus people fundamental paradigm. And still, enlightened command and control is an improved version, a much better version than authoritarian command and control. But still, too often, people are a means to an end instead of an end in and of themselves, along with results.
Sure.
And so that and approach, get results in a way that grows people instead of just get results through people, and then therefore just a means to an end. So that's probably the biggest paradigm difference. And even the difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is external, extrinsic rewards, and it motivates people to want to get more rewards so it can work, but you got to constantly provide more carrots or more sticks, and more stimuli to kind of move people. Whereas inspiration comes from the Latin term inspirare, which means to breathe life into. So you're breathing life into people, into relationships, into teams, into organizations, and you ignite the fire that's within. You light the candle within, and that can burn on for years without having to have constant new stimuli of more rewards. And that's to inspire people, not merely motivate them, is different in kind than just more carrot and sticks, more rewards. And so, there's a number of these distinctions between the enlightened command and control and the trust and inspire that really make a profound difference at the end of the day.
Sometimes I think of motivation as sort of make me do something, and inspiration as a want to do something. Is that a fair way to look at it?
It is. A motivation is something that you move people to it, and inspiration is they move themselves toward it.
Yeah.
Versus it's not you doing it to them through systems and rewards, carrots and sticks. It's they choosing it because they connect with it, and it's part of what burns inside of them. And it's just, and people are whole people. They have a body, a heart, a mind, and a spirit. If people were just economic beings only and came to work just for money, then maybe carrot and stick motivation is sufficient. But, that's the command and control paradigm of people are just compartmentalized, beings, economic beings. But a Trust&Inspire mindset paradigm is people are whole people, and body, heart, mind, spirit. They bring their whole selves to work. So my job as a leader is to inspire, not merely motivate. If they were economic beings only, the motivation would be sufficient. And so, these are some of the distinctions, the contrast. But you're right, Mike. Throughout the entire book, it's an ongoing construct of what command and control looks like, what Trust and Inspire looks like, in a variety of different things. Command and control is about compliance. Trust and Inspire is about commitment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And on and on. Command and control is about coordination. Trust and Inspire about collaboration. Command and control you'll achieve association. Trust and Inspire, you'll achieve belonging and inclusion. Just another level that's different, not just in degree, but different in kind. And that's probably the biggest distinction. Within the command and control spectrum, you'll move from authoritarian to enlightened command and control. That's different in degree. Trust and Inspire is different in kind. It's just a whole different approach of how you view people, how you view leadership. And that's what we need today to unleash the greatness inside of people.
Yeah. So two things on that. First, there's a really incredible example in the book of a CEO who was a year into the job, sort of wrote an open letter to the team that said, hey, the board appointed me to be CEO. The shareholders, like what's happening in the company, but I really want to understand what you think about the job that I'm doing. And essentially, it was a survey of his. It was like a 360 review that he asked for in a Survey Monkey or something. And he said right in there, if he was kind of like asking for a vote of no confidence or vote of confidence, no confidence. But not because his job was threatened. The board supported everything. It was just because he wanted to be sure that he was making the right impact on the people on the team. So it was a very unusual, I think, because first of all, most of the ones you read about in the Wall Street Journal is the I have support of the board, so I'm doing whatever I want to do. Or I don't have the support of the board and I'm getting, kicked out. It was a very interesting nuance, or maybe not nuance, but it was a very interesting story about one person's approach to, am I really connecting with people? Do they trust me? Right?
Yeah, it was really remarkable. I spent time with this leader, and he shared this whole experience. And I first learned about it from one of his direct reports.
Okay.
He says, you got to see what my boss did. There's over 1,000 people. So this was not a huge company, but it's not a small company either.
Yeah.
And he literally put it out there. Do you want me to continue on as your leader? Yes, the board's appointed me, but enough, it's been a year, enough time has passed to determine whether you want me to continue as your leader. If you do, I'll gladly serve you. If you don't, I'll move along. And, it was anonymous, no tracing back. And, it took enormous courage, but I talked with him and he had a sense of his own sense of who he was and his credibility. He was a good model. He demonstrated character. He demonstrated competence. And so he wasn't going into this blindly. He had some confidence that he was a good leader and he was doing a good job, but he wanted them to choose him, just like the board had. But he felt like, it was really believing that they would.
Right.
But he knew that by giving them the chance to choose him, they would become far more committed to the company, to him, to partnering. And so it was a bold and a courageous move. And at the same time, he also felt like, I can do this. I think I've demonstrated enough that people do have confidence in me. And I think the very act of being open and vulnerable like this will, in fact, build even more confidence in me, that I'm not just relying upon position, but I'm trying to do this on influence. And not just on formal authority, but on moral authority. And that's exactly what happened. And it is quite a remarkable story. And when I spent time with him, I was really, really impressed by it.
And it's a direct message to everyone. I care about what you think. It's that ask thing that we were saying before. I'm going to ask you for something. I'm not just going to assume something, and I care what you think. I'm giving you a forum to express yourself.
Absolutely. And that came through. So many messages came through with this. His own, is he credible? And he was. His openness, his asking, his caring, and his vulnerability, his transparency. But the net effect was there was greater commitment. The greater the involvement, the greater the commitment.
Yeah.
And that's a Trust&Inspire leader. So Trust&Inspire leaders, they start with modeling. That's who they are. And that's what this leader demonstrated by who he was. He modeled this. He went first. He was open. He listened. What do you think? I care about your opinion. And he modeled the behavior. Then they focus on trusting. They, in a sense, modeling is like being trustworthy. And then you need to then extend the trust, be trusting, because you could have two trustworthy people working together, both trustworthy, and yet no trust between them if neither person's willing to extend it to the other. So, the first stewardship of a Trust&Inspire leader is modeling. In a sense, that's trustworthiness. The second stewardship is trusting, extending that trust to other people so that you give them opportunities, bring out the best in them, help them grow and develop, and give them a chance to show their potential and their greatness and develop it. And then the third is inspiring. And the idea that inspiring others is a learnable skill. It's not just for the charismatic. We've often conflated charisma and inspiration as if they were the same. And I don't know about you, Mike, but I know some people who are charismatic, but who aren't necessarily inspiring. And
or trustworthy.
And I know other people who no one would necessarily describe as, quote, charismatic, but who are extraordinarily inspiring.
Right.
Because of who they are and how they care and how they connect, but not necessarily charismatic. And so they're not the same. Inspiring others is learnable as a skill through connecting with people, through this caring and belonging, and then connecting people to purpose and to meaning and to contribution. Those things are learnable. So the point is everyone can inspire. It's a learnable skill. And it is a stewardship, a responsibility we have as leaders to not only trust our people, but to inspire our people. So modeling, trusting, inspiring. Those are the three stewardships of a Trust&Inspire leader. And that's, in the Trust&Inspire book, I kind of build that model throughout and give examples and stories of how we can become better at modeling, at trusting, and at inspiring.
And my final question for you, Stephen, is that early in the book, you tell a story about this particular area of Death Valley that did not receive rain for a long period of time. And in one year in 2004 or 2005, I can't remember, 6 inches of rain happened to fall in a short period of time. And the area went from sort of a barren, thought to be dead area to, green and life. And I think you make the point is that, it wasn't dead, it was just dormant. And it makes me wonder, if you're inside an organization and you know that there's no trust and no inspiration going on, and you're not the leader, but you care about what's happening, what would you recommend that people do to like anyone can inspire, right? So what do you recommend that people do when they're not the leader, but they're in a situation where there's too much command and control, let's say?
Yeah. Well, what you're describing, Mike, is pretty common for a lot of us at different times in different situations where, maybe you're in a command and control environment, or you have a command and control boss, or maybe the industry is very command and control, and there might be lots of reasons, or maybe you're just not the leader. Maybe you're a team member, not the team leader.
Right.
And so my advice is that you always look in the mirror and start with yourself. And I use the metaphor of the ripple effect, where the drop of water comes down and the ripples, the waves, they start at the inside and they ripple out. And so you work within your circle of influence, and maybe you just work on yourself, which is, I'm going to focus on my modeling, my credibility, and then on my relationships one-on-one. And I'll model behavior to those I work with. I'll extend trust to those, and I'll work on inspiring through my caring and building a sense of belonging, even though I'm not the team leader. And then the point is, wherever you're standing, you lift where you stand. You begin to model this and let that ripple out from there. And you'll be amazed at how it can impact and ripple out. And otherwise, we can become almost paralyzed by all the things outside of our control. Mm-hmm. And so I'll come back to my father's idea of, in the 7 habits, of your circle of concern is broader. Your circle of influence is more narrow. Within that circle of concern, if you focus on your circle of influence, it will grow and expand. If you focus on the circle of concern, the things that you're concerned about but can do nothing about, your circle of influence will contract and narrow. So work where you're at. Focus on becoming Trust and Inspire in your world. Maybe it's just in your home, with your family, or in your neighborhood, or in your community, or on your team as a team member, or on your team as a team leader, and you ripple out from there. But don't underestimate the power of this ripple effect and what it can do. And so that's the great thing, is it's empowering to everyone wherever we're at. And I make the point as well that everyone's a leader. Leadership is a choice, not a position. Mm-hmm. And so you're a leader in your home, you're a leader in your community, you're a leader in your neighborhood, you're a leader at work, even if you're not having people report to you. Leadership is a choice. And so we can all lead and help bring about the things that we're seeking, the change that we're seeking. We can model it. We can model the behavior that we seek from others. If we're not getting it from our boss, then let's model that to our boss and for our boss. And the more credible you become, the more results you get, and in a way that builds the trust and builds the relationships and grows the people, then you're giving others a model that they can look to and say, aha, look what Mike's doing. Right. And look at the impact Mike's having. And you can become that model. We need models who can become mentors. We need models of Trust and Inspire leaders. And I try to name a number of them in the book, from Satya Nadella at Microsoft, who literally unleashed enormous potential talent. He had a growth mindset for everyone and unleashed it. They call it model coach care. It's the same idea of model Trust Inspire, unleashing the greatness inside of people. To Cheryl Batchelder, what she did at Popeyes to turn them around.
Yeah, that was great.
Turn around. And, and to many, many others. We need models who can become mentors. And I just would challenge all of our listeners and viewers is become that model for others. And maybe a reflection on this might be to think, for each of us, to think of a person. Earlier on in this in this conversation, I like that this is a conversation.
Yeah.
But Mike, you'd kind of brought up, that there's been command and control leaders in our lives that we've had, managers, and I've had them, you've had them. I bet most of our listeners and viewers have. But I'll bet there's also been some people in your life that you might describe as a Trust and Inspire leader, a parent, a friend, a coach, a clergy, someone in your life who believed in you, who maybe believed in you more than you believed in yourself, who took a chance on you, who gave you an opportunity, who trusted and inspired you. You mentioned John Walsh, my first boss. He was one who took a chance on me when no one else did. My father was this type of parent for me. I've had some trust and inspire leaders, just like I've had command and control leaders. And what that did to me when someone believes in me, how I felt about it. I didn't need to be managed. I became very inspired and self-motivated, and it brought out the best in me. And I wanted to prove the trust, their belief in me justified. I wanted to give back and such. So I bet we've all had someone like that. So my invitation for all of us is, as you reflect back on a person who's done that for you, for whom could you become that kind of person? For whom could you become a trust and inspire mentor, coach, parent, leader in your life? Is there someone in your life that if you became a trust and inspire person for that individual could have a profound impact on their life, just like someone has had on your life, to pay it forward, in other words. And that's a way of thinking about this that's both backward looking and showing gratitude to those who have been trust and inspire for us and what that did for us. And I would encourage us, by the way, to thank that person. You'll be amazed at what it does to them when you acknowledge them and what they've done for you, what it does to them and what it does to you when you express it. Mm. Then to look forward of how you can become that kind of person for another. And if you can do it with one, you could do it with many. And that's a good starting point, and maybe an invitation for every one of our listeners to identify a relationship in your life where you would like to become a trust and inspire person in that person's life and what it might do for them.
That's an amazing gift to leave us all with, Stephen. One last thing I was thinking when you were saying two trustworthy people could, not trust one another. I've been thinking ever since you said that, at least in the US and probably most of the world, 99.9999999% of people trust the other person at a traffic light or a stop sign to do what they're supposed to do based on what the sign says.
Yep.
And if you can trust 99.99999% of people to do that, how could you not trust them, or at least give them the benefit of trust to start a new relationship together, right? They're total strangers who have no vested interest in you at all, but they do it. You trust each other. It's maybe a dumb example, but it's just been shaking me.
It's a beautiful example of really how our whole world runs on trust.
Yeah.
Some level, because imagine if you didn't and couldn't trust the person driving next to you.
Yeah.
And it was every person for themselves. Right. And no one obeyed the laws, and it was just a free for all. You couldn't go outside. You couldn't go anywhere. It would be too risky, too dangerous. So our whole world runs on trust. And so we have it at some levels. It's broken down in other ways. But the point is, it's a better way to lead. It's a better way to live. It's a better starting point. As I work with a colleague or a peer, to start with the premise, I start with trust until proven otherwise, versus the other way around, which is I don't trust anyone until you prove that I can. The problem with that is that life happens too fast, and people tend to reciprocate the trust that's given or withheld. So if you lead out and extend trust with others, they'll tend to reciprocate and give it back. You can still do it in a smart way. If you're extending trust, you can do it with expectations and accountability so that it's smart. But you'll be amazed at what it does to people and how they respond to it, how they rise to the occasion, how they perform better, and how they reciprocate and give it back to you. And then it becomes this virtuous upward spiral. That's kind of what needed to happen in my story of how did it happen for me. I had to kind of earn that trust and give that trust. Right. And I had to do both. And when I began to do both better, it came back to me, and then we were able to do great things together.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Thank you for writing this newest book of yours, Trust and Inspire, How Truly Great Leaders Unleash Greatness in Others. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad that I've had the chance to explore your story and just talk to you. It's been great. I feel really good about it.
Thank you so much, Mike. I love the conversation as well. I appreciate you and what you're doing and how you're allowing and enabling people to tell their story of how it happened for them. And there's a beautiful premise, and I commend you. And I really think that this can help bring out the greatness in your listeners as they hear people sharing these stories, these experiences. So thank you. I love the conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Everybody pick up the book, Trust and Inspire. I suppose it's available wherever you get books.
Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. So get it. Trust and Inspire. Stephen, thank you so much.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Mike. Just
a quick note, Joe. You'll notice that during the interview, I make a reference to incentives, in particular, a story about Russian nail production incentives that I thought was in. I thought I had read it in Stephen's book, Trust and Inspire, but I had actually read it in a newsletter, the Curiosity Chronicle, earlier the day that we recorded this. So my apologies for the misreference.